Hey ChatGPT, write an introduction to my next YouTube video. Hello and welcome to this video where I share my experience as an author using ChatGPT to write fiction. As a writer, I'm always on the lookout for new tools and techniques to help me in my craft. That's why I was intrigued when I first heard about OpenAI's ChatGPT and its potential to revolutionize the writing process. In this video, I'll take you through my journey using ChatGPT to write fiction and share my insights on how it's impacted my writing process. From generating new ideas to fleshing out characters, I'll show you how ChatGPT has become an indispensable part of my writing toolkit. So whether you're an aspiring author or a seasoned pro, this video is for you. Let's dive in. So I don't know if I would say indispensable, but we'll get into that. I can't tell you how many takes that took to read that verbatim. So in my last video, I talked about how I used ChatGPT to write a short story collection in 2 weeks. I have so many notes from the process that for that video, I just picked the high-level things to go over, but I figured in this one, I will do more of a deep dive on the process and all the little funny things that ChatGPT tended to do. So at first, I could not get ChatGPT to make up a new word to name a fictional land based on Greek mythology. Every time I would try, no matter what I prompted it to do, it would continually give me names of real places or places from Greek mythology. But later on towards the end of the process, I was actually able to get it to generate some names for a village that were not based on real places. I chose Shadowdale from its suggestions, a very simple way of creating fantasy town names, but it totally works for me. So when generating a ton of content, if your prompts are vague, GPT will start respinning the same things and all of your paragraphs will be very similar. It doesn't take long to figure out that you have to be really specific with your prompts, but you can spend a lot of time tweaking your prompts. Using specific language is very important when you're generating and you're kind of wrangling the AI at times. ChatGPT sometimes struggles to understand your whole prompt if you're not very clear about what you want it to change where, especially when working with larger chunks of text, like a few paragraphs or more. If I ask it to write something with a few paragraphs and then ask it to rewrite some details, it will usually change those details and then repeat the rest of it exactly how it was before instead of taking that new information into context. Along with having a very basic, generic / bland writing style, in my opinion, it also has some pretty poor writing skills sometimes. The prose is full of passive verbs and unnecessary wordiness. Now, this is something that OpenAI states on their website as being a current limit / issue with ChatGPT. Most of its sentences start with nouns, and it does a lot of telling instead of showing, or sometimes it does both at the same time, one after the other, leaves a lot of redundant content that you have to cut out later. It is very difficult to get ChatGPT to go into detail, and you have to tell it not only to add detail, but what kind of detail exactly. Add detail about how the character feels afraid of the monster, or add detail about the setting to make it more ominous. Without this kind of information, you get really basic output. I ended up pretty much putting 2 or 3 detail requests in every single prompt. And while this does mean prompting is slower, I think it saves time overall. I found it really helpful to make small adjustments as I go. And sometimes I just couldn't get it to work with me, and I just had to take 2 or 3 of the different versions it created and combine them together to get what I was looking for. This really does slow down the process, but at some points it was necessary and is faster than trying to continually regenerate things to get something that was better. Something else that I learned pretty early on is that if you want dialogue in the text that it outputs, you pretty much have to specify that. Even if you say, write a paragraph where these 2 characters talk about this, it will sometimes not give you dialogue. I would say only 1 in 3 times will it actually put dialogue in the paragraph, which can be very frustrating. Usually I would have to prompt and say add dialogue. Otherwise, it would just say, and then they talked about this. Also, if you want dialogue, you have to be really specific about how the conversation goes, because a lot of the times it just can't make up these details and fill in like a natural sounding conversation. So on January 11th, I wrote that I'm not sure if ChatGPT learns to predict what you're going to ask, but now it's adding title options for scenes and stories after I prompt for an outline. Interesting and helpful, but also scary. Agreed, past Sydney, a little bit scary. I would usually have it outline a short story, and then after that, I would ask it for some title suggestions for the story itself. And then I would do the same thing for each chapter. So I don't remember when exactly this is, January 11th, so this is a little bit early on in the process, but it was giving me title suggestions for chapters and stories while I was still generating the outline, which is something I had previously asked for. So that's kind of interesting. The collection follows a hero named Ajax in a Greek mythology type world. And while I was outlining the last story in the collection, I was having having trouble getting it to suggest things that weren't already covered in the Percy Jackson series. So in the first story, Ajax meets a griffin who was sent by the gods to help him fulfill his destiny of destroying a great evil. So after that, I was kind of steering each of the stories towards that great evil at the very last story. I spent quite a long time getting it to generate ideas before it came up with something that wasn't super overused or just like some of the most popular things from Greek mythology and retellings. I keep wanting to say we, like me and ChatGPT are just two people working together, creating a story. So one kind of strange thing is that when I was prompting it to create options for a powerful object that the evil sorceress could use in the story, the first few times I prompted, it gave me all of the well-known ones that have been used in lots of Greek mythology stories and lots of Greek mythology retellings. But I wanted to push it to get something at least a little different, so I prompted many times. I couldn't get it to come up with anything except for pretty much the 5 most popular options, so I started prompting it for more generic options, went through a few of those lists of ideas, but then went back to asking it specifically for things based on Greek mythology, specifically things crafted by the god Hephaestus. After one of my prompts, its response was this: some of the most famous objects Hephaestus created include, and then it gave me a list of 7 objects. 5 of them were actually things found in Greek mythology that Hephaestus was known to have created. However, 2 were not. 2 were made up. The list of things that it said were famous from Greek mythology, 2 of them were made up by ChatGPT. Nah, I'm just messing with you. Here you go. Here's some fake ones. That goes to show you, always check ChatGPT's work. This actually ended up working out for me because I chose one of those things that was very interesting. I might not have even noticed that, except the last many times I prompted it, it gave me things I had already heard of. I'm not a Greek mythology buff by any means. I have read the Percy Jackson books, but definitely no expert on the subject. I don't know a lot of the detailed or lesser known characters, but this is one of those things that while I was having it generating, I was like, where is it pulling this from? What is this? I've never even heard of this. Wow, let me look that up on Google and see what it's about. Oh, that's not actually a thing. Huh. This is something that is mentioned on the OpenAI website about one of ChatGPT's kind of limitations or known issues, is that the information it outputs is not always accurate. Kind of wasn't expecting it to come out this way when I was generating things. It was kind of interesting. So throughout the process, ChatGPT would frequently change point of view, and as I didn't feel like adding from Ajax's point of view to every single prompt, I decided to just kind of go with the omniscient head hopping of it and kind of get a little bit of insight into lots of different character sets. I wanted to work with what I had, and I didn't want to feel like I was influencing it too much. I really wanted to see like what the output would be. That was kind of the whole point of this experiment. It seemed like sometimes ChatGPT is more likely to take into context the more recent answers that it gave you instead of the kind of generating history. So sometimes it would kind of reference something or work off of something that was only, 3 or 4 generations ago instead of the information that I actually gave it. So that was a little interesting to work around. You can kind of scroll up a little and read your last couple of prompts or output and see where it got that information from, but that's not exactly what you asked for, but you can see how it went there. As I was editing the first story is when I realized just how much is really missing from the output. Along with there being little to no characterization, the story generally lacks a point. I'm not sure how you would go about getting ChatGPT to write a character arc. This would, I think, be really difficult for you to just kind of have it naturally do. You'd have to figure it all out yourself kind of beforehand, or at least heavily influence it. And of course, my experiment that I did with Legends of the Shadow Woods is probably not the way that most people are or would be using ChatGPT to write fiction right now. I think you would be using it a lot more as an idea generator or characterization or writing small pieces of text that you then heavily edit. Whereas me with this project, I kind of wanted to have the least amount of my influence as possible on the generating side of it, and then just take what ChatGPT outputted, edit it enough so that people could read it, but not so much that I was really affecting the way that it sounded and stuff. I wanted to preserve as much of the AI content as possible while still making it a readable story. And I think it would be kind of interesting for me to do another one of these projects in the future, but using it to write something more in my style. I think it's kind of funny how something can be so unique and so kind of basic at the same time. Legends of the Shadow Woods that I created is unique because of the technology used to create it, but basic because of how bland it is. It is not quality fiction. The driver and interest here is readers' curiosity about AI, not necessarily the story or the characters themselves. Right now, generating with ChatGPT for making a book or story is not as easy as prompting and copying and pasting. The output is clunky at best, and if not prompted specifically, bland and very repetitive. I keep saying right now and yet and in the future because as much as some people might hate the idea of AI programs like this, I don't think there's any stopping them. I think because there is money to be being made here, I think they will continue to improve and be used. I can see in a few years ChatGPT or similar program could output quality fiction, whatever that means. Something that requires little to no editing on the human author's part. This is most definitely a whole video topic or video series topic by itself, so I will talk about that another day. It's not like I'm just sitting here telling it or write a story about this, taking that and publishing it. To get something readable, we still need a lot of human skills. I did a lot of editing, and it is still not up to my standards as a reader or writer. So here are some notes on ChatGPT being difficult. This note is from generating the second story about the character's origins. ChatGPT is in a mood today, I guess. It keeps giving me glitchy results, like just repeating the same sentence over a dozen times at the end of the paragraph, or repeating the same sentence a bunch of times with slightly different versions like it's using a thesaurus. I'm going to have to cut through so much unusable content for this. I remember this and it was really annoying. The stop generating feature is very, very helpful and I'm so glad they added it, but this was before they added it, so I just had to sit there and wait for it to be done, which was a while sometimes. It would basically just repeat itself. It kind of got stuck in a loop or something. So it would just repeat the same sentence for like, I don't know, 50 times, 80 times. So while generating the next story, I prompted for a few paragraphs about two characters sneaking into a king's tent on a spy mission when they discover a letter that gives them some clues. I then prompted ChatGPT to write the contents of the letter. And here's what it said. It said, "I'm sorry, but I am not able to write the specific letter you have described, as the contents of the letter is a crucial component of the plot you have outlined, and as such, it would spoil it. But I can provide you with an example of a generic letter or document on a given topic." So after this, I regenerated the exact same prompt and it gave me exactly what I was looking for. So sometimes it's like it's telling a story and it doesn't want to spoil it to you, but by what it said, it was like, I don't want to spoil it for you, even though you already outlined the story and know what the letter says. It was kind of weird. So for a while, it also kept switching tense. It was not doing this before, but it happened a few times within 1 hour of prompting. It's easy enough to reprompt and get it to write the same thing, but in past tense. Here's another note. GPT refreshed or something as I was generating the last paragraph, that was in all caps, of story 3. Basically got what I needed before it got rid of the chat history, and GPT was down for a while that day, and I almost lost a whole bunch of work. Save your work, kids. I also moved into a new chat for the next story as it was difficult to keep organized near the end. So it seemed like the longer the chat I'm working in, the more ChatGPT gets slower and more chaotic. It had a higher tendency to give longer chunks of repeating text. It sometimes restates something a bunch of times, adds paragraphs of summarizing. So while working on chapter 3 of the last story, there were 5 chapters in each story, I decided to try adding a small bit of foreshadowing just to kind of play with different ideas in ChatGPT. I prompted it for a paragraph where the characters notice an inscription on the cave wall near the entrance. Later, they come to a puzzle. After that, I only prompted ChatGPT to write about the group trying to hop on different tiles, trying various combinations. All on its own, it tried to reuse the thing I had it add previously from the cave wall. I accidentally hit stop generating and I was totally kicking myself for that. I redid it and reproduced it. It made the characters come to the conclusion I was planning on, all on its own. It is important to mention here that it was just a few prompts ago, and right before that prompt, I was asking it for information on the hierarchy of the Greek gods. But it put together that that's where I was going, like it came to the same conclusion. So I had it write, follow the 12, which was the mysterious inscription on the cave wall. 12 major Greek gods, and they would go into the cave, they went through lots of tunnels and fought some bad guys and then came to a puzzle room. They had to step on the tiles in the correct order, and the tiles all had different little inscriptions on them. It figured out that that's what the inscription on the cave meant, is the 12 major gods and all the tiles on the floor, like that. I gave it all that information. So it makes sense that somebody could figure that out, but ChatGPT figured that out, and that kind of blew my mind. I think I feel equally both ways. It was freaky and awesome. That just goes to show you though, that the more information you give it, the better ChatGPT works. Okay, so my last section here is about AI detectors. Early on in the process, I took a sample of what ChatGPT put out and put it through a few different free AI content detector websites. And they all said 95 to 100% what I put in was AI generated content. The only thing that I had done to the text is switch around the position of a couple of sentences, but the words were all the same. So just to test them, I put a sample of my own 100% non-AI generated book into the same websites, and they all said 5% or less chance of being AI generated text. So then after that, I took the original chunk of text and did a quick manual edit of the AI generated text and used a few of my pro writing aid tools, then proofread it and tried this again. So after editing that chunk of text, the AI detectors said 88.6% AI generated content, 51% AI generated content, 93%, 94%, and the last one, 47%. Like I said before, my goal with editing this project was not to make it into my own style at all. This is very different from my usual style, and I would basically be rewriting it if I were to do that, not to create a story with incredible prose or to have a deep moving story, but to see what this thing could do if I worked around it. I kind of approached it like I was like an editor or a beta reader or like a ghostwriter almost. A ghostwriter and an editor and a beta reader are all very different processes, but somewhere in there you get the idea. So of the edited 294 words, 198 of them were AI generated, and 96 of them were added by me. That's about 32% human content. I actually expected those quick edits to make a bigger difference as far as the AI content detectors were concerned. I figured the main thing they were looking at was the things that I was seeing, the sentence structure and repeated word usage. Clearly, these things are looking at more factors than that because I wasn't really able to fool them. I'm not really sure how these content detectors work or anything, but I thought this was really interesting. So there is my experience using AI to create a short story collection. Although I published this as an ebook, I also formatted it as a hardcover. This is my proof copy. I'm not sure if anybody else would want a hardcover copy because the ebook is only 99 cents, but I figured I will put it up there anyway just in case anybody else does. So I think in my next video, I want to talk about AI and the future of writers and media. So stay tuned for that. All right, that's all I got for you. So thanks for watching. Bye.